What's up guys, it's Gone, and today we'll be looking at the absolute dominance of the Atlanta Braves and a timeline for how they got there. For its year with a bunch of good teams such as the Rays or Dodgers, the Braves have seemed to separate themselves from the competition pretty fast. The Braves have had a league-leading 8 All-Stars this year with 3 All-Star starters. No other team has had this much star talent as well as this much depth to go behind it in recent memory. For some perspective, in a casual redraft league I'm in, someone decided to go very heavy on Atlanta Braves players, drafting them primarily in the original draft and then overpaying for the ones who broke out and he didn't have, like Julio Urias for AJ Smith-Shawver. He's currently 82 and 78 with win totals vastly above the majority of other competitors with real teams. And with no other major league team is this even possible, and this speaks wonders about the Braves' overall depth and star production at the top of their lineup. However, the question is, how is this fair and how did they even do this? Unlike other great teams, the vast majority of their production wasn't bought at the apex of their careers in free agency, but instead was a product of a deep and clean rebuild combined with excellent development. But before we get onto this timeline, could you guys please hit the like and subscribe button? Currently, only 3% of people who watch my videos are subscribed, so if y'all do, not only will it help me grow my channel, but also encourages me to create more videos like this one for you guys. And without further ado, let's get on to the video. The 2014 season was a crossroads in what was to come. They had talent but not enough of it, and were overall a streaky team that ended up not making the playoffs after reaching there the previous 2 seasons but not making it past the NLDS. They started the year 17-7 and were at one point 58-48 on July 28th. However, multiple 5-game losing streaks, including a record of 4-16 to close out the year in September, all but eliminated the Braves' chances of competing and left them with a losing record in the end. Despite this, they still had some really good players, led in part by Jason Hayward, an elite defender and right, to go along with above-average hitting, and a young Freddie Freeman, who would make his second straight All-Star appearance, looking like one of the league's brightest young stars. And on the pitching side, they were led by a 1-2 punch of Julio Teheran and Alex Wood, with the former making an All-Star appearance. In the bullpen, Craig Kimbrell had 47 saves and was also an All-Star. So, there was a lot of talent on this team, but a shaky second half of their rotation and a half of the lineup not producing ended up costing them in the end. And with a below-average farm system at the time, the Braves would have to make a choice to run this relatively young core back for another try or sell high on these pieces and hope for better times later. So, after that disappointing season, this Braves organization therefore decided that, with the contracts of their big names expiring soon with no hope of improvement due to a poor farm system, the best course of action would be to go for a mini rebuild of sorts. For starters, they traded their Gold Glove winner and WAR leader in Jason Hayward to the Cardinals for pitching prospect in Tyrell Jenkins and a young starting pitcher in Shelby Miller, a former top prospect who, at one point, pitched to a 3.33 ERA in 370 innings. The hope here with Shelby Miller was to mold him into the ace of the next Braves rotation, at only 24 years old at the time. Next, they traded Justin Upton to the offseason winner San Diego Padres for a package of prospects, with the headliners being left-handed pitcher Max Fried and infielder Jace Peterson. Justin Upton would go on to be an All-Star for the Padres for 1 year, but the Braves got really good return packages in return that would eventually pay big league dividends. Lastly, they would trade their starting catcher in Evan Gattis to the Astros for a package headlined around starting pitcher Mike Foltynewicz. With these trades, they are committing themselves to a rebuild, but by keeping their young stars like Freeman and Julio Teheran, they're going to try and build around that core. With that, their prime contention window would pan out to be a couple of years, rather than those full-length rebuilds that take like 5 to 8 years. Right before opening day, the Braves would also end up trading All-Star Craig Kimbrell to the Padres for a package of prospects, mainly centered around outfielder Cameron Maybin, and the 41st overall pick in that year's draft. As expected, the 2015 team did take a step back due to losses in their hitting core, putting them well below league average and regression from their pitching staff. At 1.5-1, this Braves team was handed heavy loss after heavy loss, until they finished 67-95, which included a stretch in which they went 1-19. However, despite the brutal record and second half slump, in part due to a trade of Alex Wood and Jim Johnson to the Dodgers, there were things to get excited about for diehard fans of the Braves. For starters, Shelby Miller was looking like he would be the ace that the Braves traded for as their lone All-Star. He posted a 3.02 ERA in 205 innings. Furthermore, Freddie Freeman continued his star pace, posting a very consistent 132 ERA plus and providing a building block for this Braves team to build around. On the minor league side, Things were beginning to show promise too, as their trade returns began to produce in the minors, as well as a young 2013 signing in Ozzie Albies, drawing buzz as he hit .310 in single A, and this unranked outfielder in Ronald Acuna Jr., who played his first games as well. In the draft, the Braves did very good with what they had in the mid to late first round, drafting Kobe Allard, Mike Soroka, and Austin Riley with the pick acquired in the Craig Kimbrell trade. Overall, despite this rebuild being only a year old, due to the minor league promise, we could already see an end in sight. The 2015-2016 offseason served as a continuation of the rebuild process by trading older players or players with expiring contracts for even more young prospects. They traded their Gold Glove winner and WAR leader of last year in Andrelton Simmons to the Angels for a package centered around their top pitching prospect Sean Newcomb. But the real blockbuster occurred when they traded their ace of the future in Shelby Miller to the Arizona Diamondbacks. In this trade, they would acquire Gold Glove outfielder Ender Inciarte, who was only 25 years old at the time. But the main piece heading back in the deal was shortstop Dansby Swanson, who was drafted number 1 overall just 6 months earlier in the 2015 draft. Shelby Miller never really materialized as the ace for the D-backs, who were hoping for one, and this would be one of the most infamous trades in both teams' history. Trading Shelby Miller just showed how committed the Braves were to their current timeline and that they knew they could sell high for players to aid their future core in a few years. However, during this 2016 season, there would be more of the same, as the team finished with a 68-93 record, but there were a few young players who would begin to get called up to the major leagues, like Fultonavich and even Dansby Swanson later in the season, to excellent results, posting a 1.1 WAR in only 32 games. Julio Teheran also had a huge bounce-back season, posting a 3.21 ERA, but the rest of the rotation was below average behind him. Freddie Freeman had his best season yet, posting an OPS plus of 157, and Ender Inciarte continued to play good defense, but overall this team did not have enough building blocks to make a competitive team. The farm system, though, really started to show fruit. Ozzie Albies continued on his good 2015 season with another good season in 2016, and Swanson immediately became the number 1 prospect in the Braves organization. The Braves draft picks from last year were doing well, especially Austin Riley and a young Ronald Acuna Jr. broke out, hitting .312 in the 2016 minor league season in A-ball. And although the 2016 draft was pretty weak overall, the Braves drafted 3 major league pitchers in Ian Anderson, Joey Wentz, and Kyle Muller, with their selections doing the best they could in a bad draft year. A relatively quiet 2016-2017 offseason in which the only moves made were for veteran players that would never really produce very well for the Major League club, leads us to the 2017 season of promise. Dansby Swanson would be playing a full season, and the prospects acquired in trades would be reaching the upper levels of the minor leagues. However, despite the improved record from last year at 70-92, thanks to those veterans like Kurt Suzuki or Tyler Flowers making an impact, this was a pretty big step back in their overall rebuild. For starters, Dansby Swanson struggled mightily in his first full season, hitting only .232 with a .340 slugging percentage in 144 games. Julio Teheran and the pitching staff overall took a huge step back in what was a rotation led primarily by R.A. Dickey, and none of the prospects that made the major league team really produced during their short times, outside of the 57 games from Ozzie Albies with 110 OPS+. The only real bright spot was Freddie Freeman, who had vaulted himself into the superstar conversation with another year with 150+ OPS+. While the major league players experienced regression and disappointment, down on the farm things were beginning to click. Ronald Acuna Jr. had another excellent season this time in the higher levels of the minor leagues, hitting a combined .325 and slugging .522, and all of the players overall, like Max Fried and Austin Riley, were producing and moving up the ranks for what was to become one of the best farm systems in the league. In the draft, with another premium selection in the first round, they would continue to lean pitchers by selecting Kyle Wright in the first round. With another quiet offseason in which the only move was trading an oft-injured Matt Kemp back to the Dodgers, Braves fans expected another developmental season. Best case scenario, they thought, was for Acuna to make his mark in the league now as one of the best prospects in the game, and for all of the young guys to take a step forward, as they possibly could make a wildcard slot, but anything over 80 wins would have been satisfactory. However, the Atlanta Braves surprised everyone with 90 wins and an NL East crown, despite being a year ahead of their rebuild, as many people thought. Ronald Acuna Jr. broke out in a big way, leading the team in OPS Plus and placing third on the team in WAR, despite only playing 111 games due to injuries and a late call-up. Freddie Freeman continued his superstar pace, and Ozzie Albies put it all together for his first full season making the All-Star team. However, the pitching side had the biggest improvement. Mike Foltynewicz took a huge step forward, posting his best season with a 2.85 ERA and his only All-Star appearance, looking like the Braves' future ace. And the rotation all around him was solidly boosted by veterans like Anibal Sanchez and rookies like Max Fried-alike. They also traded for Kevin Gausman and Darren O'Day in the midseason trade deadline from the Orioles, who pitched to great results in their first season. Unfortunately, this team would lose in 4 games to the eventual pennant-winning Los Angeles Dodgers, but Braves fans had a lot to like about this season on the major league level, as their top prospects began to produce. Despite the losses of Swanson and Albies followed by Acuna in their farm system, aided by excellent development, this Braves farm system continued to take steps forward, especially with their top-end pitchers of Soroka, Wright, and Mueller. On a relatively hit-or-miss 2018 draft, the Braves would spend the last of their top selections on Carter Stewart, who would end up not signing with the Braves but instead to play in Japan, where he still is today, which definitely hurt the Braves farm system, but not for long. Surprisingly, despite having a great farm system and the desire to win, the Braves elected to add via free agency rather than trades going into the 2019 season. They signed Josh Donaldson to a 1-year prove-it deal and Brian McCann as well. Any great improvement to this team overall would have to come from their top-of-the-line starting pitching prospects. Early into the season, the Braves would sign both Ronald Acuna Jr. and Ozzie Albies to extensions, buying out the rest of their controllable years as well as a couple years of free agency. Looking back at it, these deals are bargains for the players that they have become, and the Braves also now have the financial stability on top of that advantage. Josh Donaldson provided every bit of that veteran presence to a young team desperately needing it, and while the team may have been relatively the same on the stat sheet, they improved their win pace by 7 games this time, finishing the season 97-65, despite having a worse run differential than last year. On the hitting side, things were widely the same, as Acuna in his first full season continued his reign of dominance, while Ozzie Albies and Freddie Freeman put up almost identical numbers from the previous year, with Albies improving just a little bit. However, on the pitching side, things could not have been more different from the previous year. Mike Foltynewicz, the team's ace last year, suffered injuries and regressed heavily to being below average. Meanwhile, the top pitching prospects in Mike Soroka and Max Fried joined the staff, with Soroka in particular dazzling, with a 2.68 ERA and an All-Star appearance in his first season. This deep lineup unfortunately still could not get past the NLDS, losing to the St. Louis Cardinals in 5 games, which again was unfortunate, but with this young core centered around Acuna and Albies, as well as the emergence of a young pitching staff led by Soroka now, the Braves had one of the brightest futures in the league still. With the expirations of their 2 top pitching prospects in Soroka and Fried, the Braves farm system would be experiencing a downturn that comes when all great teams experience prolonged success. However, in the excellent 2019 draft, the Braves were able to grab Shea Langoliers with the Carter Stewart draft pick and Michael Harris in the second round. Without these selections, I have no doubts that this team's sustained success would not be as prominent, as these selections allowed the Braves to continue to have a deep farm system for future trades. Continuing with the 1-year prove-it deals, after losing Josh Donaldson to the Twins in free agency, the Atlanta Braves would be doing this again by signing Marcell Ozuna in the 2019-2020 offseason, as well as steady relievers like Will Smith and Mark Melancon, who they also re-signed. Obviously, a shortened 2020 season would mean increased variations, but this Braves team was much more stable than others. This team was still very good, finishing at a 35-25 clip and winning their division for a 3rd time in a row. They were led by Freddie Freeman, who was always in the mix for some awards but never actually won one until this year, where he matched with an incredible 187 OPS plus and 3.3 WAR in only 60 games, leading to his first ever MVP award. Acuna and Albies continued with their usual prominence, but the real surprise here was Dansby Swanson. For the first time since his rookie year, Swanson stayed healthy and posted great numbers with an OPS plus of 111 to go along with excellent defense, becoming one of the stars on the team. But, in a worrying trend, last year's ace could not continue to put up consistent numbers, with Soroka tearing his Achilles. Instead, the next wave of great young pitching prospects in Ian Anderson and Kyle Wright took hold as the co-aces of the Braves. However, the lack of pitching depth outside of Wright and Anderson led to a disastrous postseason, in which they would make it past the NLDS for the first time, but blow a 3-1 lead to the Dodgers in the NLCS. Despite no minor league season this year, the Braves farm system improved with a crushed draft in the shortened 2020 season by selecting Jared Schuster in the first round when it seemed like teams were throwing darts, but they also selected one Spencer Strider in the 4th round and Bryce Elder in the 5th round, in what would be a couple of steals of the draft. The 2020-2021 offseason saw no major moves outside of the re-signing of Marcelo Zuna to a 4-year, $65 million deal, and the signing of Charlie Morton on a 1-year contract to aid to this young pitching staff. But this team was already considered one of the best in the league, and no major moves would need to be done to consider this team a World Series contender. The 2021 season is one that will go down from generation to generation among Braves fans as a historic comeback, and a lesson in sports in that it's not over until it's over. At the start of the season, despite Ronald Acuna Jr. playing at an MVP level with a 158 OPS+, and Freeman continuing to do what he does, the Braves were hovering around 500 with regression to much of their hitting core. However, in the weak NL East, there was still hope until Ronald Acuna Jr. tears his ACL, diving for a ball on July 10th in Miami, effectively killing the Braves season. However, despite being 2 games under 500 at the trade deadline, they surprisingly bought, being more active than most, acquiring Jock Peterson, Jorge Soler, Eddie Rosario, and Adam Duvall to aid in a possible playoff push. I found them surprising as to why they buy when it seems like all hope was lost, until they began winning thanks to these new pieces. They finished the season on a 36-18 run following the trade deadline, and ended up carrying that momentum all the way into one of the most improbable World Series wins I've ever seen. However, when you look back at the stat sheet, it's easy to see how this team competed for a World Series. Those midseason trades added depth to a lineup that already had the star talent in Freeman and breakout candidate Austin Riley, who was playing kind of like an MVP, and the rotation and bullpen were solid enough to support an elite-level lineup, especially with very little regression from their young star pitchers. The 2022 offseason saw the loss of franchise face Freddie Freeman to the Los Angeles Dodgers in free agency. Obviously, this would sting as Freeman had been with the ball club for over a decade now, survived the long rebuild, and just reached the highest of highs, winning the World Series with the team. However, emotions aside, the Braves now have a Freddie Freeman-sized hole to deal with at first base, and late into the offseason, the Braves did something they previously had refrained from doing in trading 4 of their top prospects in Christian Pache, Shea Langoliers, Ryan Cusick, who was drafted just a year earlier in the first round, and Joey Estes, for Matt Olson. In doing this and signing him long-term, the Braves now have their new power-hitting first baseman for the time being. During the 2022 season, it seemed like the Braves were still missing Freddie Freeman for the beginning portion of the season, starting out the season 23-27, until a Brian Snitker speech in Arizona caused the club to go on a 13-game winning streak, and they rode that all the way to October and into a playoff spot. Although Matt Olson and Ronald Acuna Jr. weren't themselves throughout the season, this team was much deeper than most, led by a continued breakout from Austin Riley and breakout NL Rookie of the Year winner in Michael Harris, who would also get on a long-term extension. On the pitching side, Max Fried continued his reign of dominance, improving on all assets to finish second in Cy Young voting with a 2.48 ERA, and Kyle Wright bounced back from an injury-riddled 2021, but the real standout here was Spencer Strider. Strider, a previously unheard-of prospect, broke out with his electric stuff as a reliever at first, but eventually transitioned into a full-time starter and blossomed there, posting a 2.67 ERA and 202 strikeouts in only 131 innings. With the re-emergence of Wright and the breakout of Strider, this Braves pitching staff was deeper than it has ever been before, and now is the focal point of the Braves staff. Unfortunately though, despite a 100-win season, they played the wrong team at the wrong time, and the red-hot Phillies, who beat them in 4 games in the NLDS. For the second straight offseason, the Braves lost another franchise face in Dansby Swanson, who had played a career year and signed a long-term deal with the Cubs. However, again for the second straight year, the Braves made a huge trade with the Oakland Athletics, sending the rest of their prospect core to the Athletics for Sean Murphy, which included their number 1 overall prospect in Kyle Mueller, and their hard-hitting catcher yet poor defender and all-star William Contreras, in a 3-team deal to get it done. With this trade, they acquire one of the best catchers in the league and a huge defensive upgrade to aid their young pitching staff. They also made a trade for relief pitcher Joe Jimenez from the Tigers and an overall minor move for a relief pitcher. Despite winning 101 games last year, there was still a lot of optimism surrounding the Braves going into this season as the World Series favorites to even improve upon this year. The 2022 team was surrounded by breakout stars that sort of lifted the struggling ones in Acuna and Olsen, who were having down seasons. However, what if Acuna and Olsen broke out along with those young stars, and now we have the 2023 season? Acuna is playing like an MVP and is the heavy frontrunner for it, while Olsen has bounced back to lead the team in home runs. Sean Murphy has been every bit the franchise-altering catcher that the Braves traded a huge piece for, and while Austin Riley has taken a step back, Ozzie Albies and Marcell Ozuna have all taken steps forward. And on the pitching side, although Kyle Wright and Max Fried have yet to make an impact on the squad, showcasing one of the few holes in this team, Spencer Strider has been excellent again, and Bryce Elder has been this year's breakout rookie, a testament to the development team to have this many impact rookies in a row. And at 60-29, they look like they're far and away the best team in the MLB and are exciting the baseball world. Overall, this team's success was vastly made through their development and especially through the draft as they hit on pick after pick. Much of their talent was acquired through there, and even though the players who aren't on the team like Mueller, they were used to acquire big names. Legendary selections like Spencer Strider in the 4th round and Elder in the 5th speak volumes on this team's ability to convert overcasted players into MLB stars and find talent where other teams find none. However, this team actually got pretty unlucky looking back, and what's scary is that this team could have been even better in this pitching rotation. From Fultonevich to Soroka to Wright to Fried to Anderson, all of these pitchers at one point looked like the aces in the making for this Braves team, and all are either hindered by injuries or have heavily regressed. If only 2 out of those 5 pitchers would have panned out to their potential and stayed healthy on the field right now for this Braves team, they would theoretically be unstoppable with the added top-of-the-line pitching depth. For this trade deadline, one can expect for the Braves to trade for some buy low pitchers in hopes of shoring up the pitching depth, but overall, this team is very deep. I don't see them trading for a big name, and they're still the easy World Series favorites for sure. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below new video ideas. This video took a long time to make, so I would appreciate a like and a comment on what team I should do next. I made a video like this on the Marlins, so if you like this video, check it out now. And I will see you guys in the next one.